For nearly 240 years, the words written in the U.S. Constitution have guided this nation, not because they possess any inherent power of enforcement, but because we, the people, and our leaders have chosen to honor them. The Constitution is not just a document, it's an agreement, a promise that we will abide by a system of laws that transcends any individual or administration. Without this shared faith in its authority, the Constitution is nothing more than ink on parchment. Well, that faith is now being tested like never before. We are witnessing something dangerous and unprecedented, an open refusal by the executive branch to recognize the authority of the judicial branch. Earlier this week, U.S. District Court Judge James Boasberg issued a temporary restraining order blocking the Trump administration from invoking the Alien Enemies Act to justify the mass deportation of Venezuelan nationals. The ruling was clear. Any flights carrying individuals subject to the executive order must return to the United States. But the Trump Department of Justice refused to comply. Rather than answering the judge's direct questions about deportation flights already in the air, the DOJ simply declared that it had no obligation to obey the court order. In a subsequent filing, they claimed that once the flight had left the United States airspace, it was no longer subject to the court's authority, even if the order had been issued before the flight landed. They went further, arguing that prior oral instruction from the judge was, quote, not enforceable because it had not been put in writing. This isn't some minor bureaucratic dispute. This is the executive branch asserting in no uncertain terms that it will only obey the courts when it chooses to do so. Judge Boasberg subsequently issued a new order demanding that the administration provide full details about these flights, but the DOJ has already announced that they will ignore him again. Look, there's no police force capable of enforcing a judge's decision against the defiant executive branch. In fact, Trump himself has already advocated for impeaching Judge Boasberg, promoting the idea that if a judge doesn't conform to Trump's wishes, he will be eliminated. If the courts can be ignored without consequence, they become meaningless. The government, or our government, is only as strong as the willingness of its leaders to abide by the laws. The U.S. Constitution created a system of checks and balances, ensuring that no single branch could operate without oversight. But what happens when a president decides that the courts no longer matter? What happens when the executive branch simply disregards the judicial branch's rulings? Well, history gives us a sobering precedent. The Roman Republic once had a functioning Senate, a judiciary, and a system of laws designed to check the power of its leaders. But when Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon, defied Senate authority, and seized power, the Republic collapsed. The Senate still existed, but it no longer held real influence. It had become a hollow institution, a relic of a bygone system of government that had been replaced by autocratic rule. So let's ask ourselves, are we witnessing the first steps toward a similar fate? If the executive branch decides that it no longer answers to the courts, what stops it from deciding that Congress is inconsequential as well? This is particularly concerning given Congress's open willingness to comply with Trump's ambitions. This crisis extends beyond politics. It touches the foundations of our economy. Like the Constitution, the U.S. dollar is built on faith. It is a fiat currency, meaning it has no intrinsic value, no gold or silver backing it, only the trust that the government will honor its obligations. The phrase full faith and credit of the United States is often used to describe the foundation of global confidence in the American economy. But what happens when that faith is discarded? If the rule of law is no longer respected, if the government is seen as unstable or unpredictable, global markets will react, and they'll react quickly. Investors will begin to question whether the United States can be relied upon to honor its commitments. The value of the dollar will plummet. The cost of borrowing will skyrocket. Hardworking Americans will feel the consequences in the form of inflation, job losses, and economic chaos. Faith in the Constitution and faith in the economy are intertwined. If one falls, the other is not far behind. So, it's up to us to take a stand, because this is not a problem Congress is going to solve for us. We've seen multiple recent examples of Congress caving to Trump's authoritarian ambitions. Though it's mostly Republicans doing the caving, there are a significant number of Democrats who, while not specifically caving in the classic sense, are sufficiently obsequious nevertheless. Republican lawmakers who once spoke of constitutional originalism and the sanctity of the rule of law are now largely silent in the face of executive defiance. Their inaction is a tacit endorsement of this creeping authoritarianism. That means it's up to us, the people, to act. We must flood the phone lines of our legislators. We must write letters to the editor. We must take to the streets and protest. We must push back against those who would erode our institutions and diminish our democracy. And perhaps most importantly, we must ensure that our future leaders respect the Constitution, not just in words, but in deeds. If we do nothing, we will wake up one day to find that our republic is gone. But if we act now, we can still preserve it. Faith in the Constitution is not passive. It requires action. It demands our engagement. The future of our democracy depends on whether we are willing to stand up and defend it. Because history is our witness, and it will judge us on what we did during this desperate hour for our nation. Many generations before us have fought for our freedom. It's now our generation's time to fight. This is our time. This is our fight. My name is Dan Schaefer, previous Democratic candidate who ran for the Missouri House of Representatives, District 97. Thank you for your time.